Everybody. This is Sheets, and we're going to be going through the early look at the NBA slate for today. We're going to take a look at who projects well. We're going to take a look at the way the slate breaks down. We're going to do some early lineup builds and hopefully teach you guys a little bit about process and how it applies to this slate. Let me first enable chat. One sec. Excellent. Okay. So yesterday was not a great day in the NBA for me. Had about almost 100% Bradley Beal. He didn't do too much. Had almost 100% quickly. He was fine. Then I took a couple of shots. As you may have remembered from the yesterday, I upped my Moses Brown exposure to about 20%. And I was speculating they would get the start, play some minutes. He did get the start. He was pretty active as well, but it just didn't work out. And I missed a couple of other things, and that's what happens in the NBA. Excuse me. So let me share my screen. We're going to go over the slate breaks down, then look at my sheets, then do a lineup build. Okay, and this is very important to see how these slates break down with respect to late swapping and things like that. And as you'll see, 7 o'clock game, then a little break, then 3 8 o'clocks, and then 2 hours, and then 10 o'clocks. And as you'll see, the values are mostly coming from these 10 o'clock games, or at least a good amount of them, which means that you should probably delay. And if anything, all else being equal, again, that's a term that is thrown around there quite a bit, but all else being equal, we should you should overweight these games anyway. So again, I've been toying with this idea the last couple of weeks of how to handle this, because again, it's certainly better, for lack of a better word, to when you're setting your lineups up before lock, to overweight games that are late, because the more flexibility you have, the better. The question is, how much more valuable is that? I mean, is that quantifiable? Maybe, but I don't know how to do that. And to date, I have not met anybody who has done it. So there are two ways to handle that. Number one is you can put your head in the sand and say, just because you can't quantify that, that means you can't allow for it. Or you can at least be directional and say, listen, I want to overweight these games a little bit, or underweight the early games a little bit. And even if I'm wrong about the degree, it's better than not doing anything. So what I'm considering, and I'm still considering, and maybe we'll try to do that today, is when you have this clear delineation between early games and late games, hey, Joanne, maybe we should just manually not alter an individual player's projection, but just the entire game total from these early games, make them a little bit less. And that way, the projections will filter down throughout all of the players. Or the opposite. I mean, we could increase the later games, but it amounts to the same thing. So we'll see if we can do that on Saberson. Next thing I want to do is take a look at the way the slate breaks down in general with respect to value. Is it a slate where you can get up to the high-priced players or not? So first thing we do is we sort this by point per dollar. And you see that unlike a lot of the last several weeks, you're getting a strong amount of value at the top of this range, at the top of the range, at the top of this sheet here. You have Trace Jackson Davis and Ish Smith both under 5K that are projecting near 6X, and that's really, really big. And it's something that we used to get a lot, but not as much anymore. And in addition to that, you get a $5,600 Chris Paul. Now, it's no accident that all three of these players are projected to be the highest owned players on the slate, because again, they open up all kinds of stuff. Like if you wanted to get to say Shea or Embiid, for example, then you play these guys. It makes your life a lot easier, and everybody knows that. So ownership is going to be really high. But so I do believe that it is going to be a slate where you can pay up, as opposed to some of the others that we've encountered in the last several months. And this is even what we know. I mean, if other stuff kind of shows up later, I mean, that maybe more value opens up. But even at this early juncture, you have these three guys who are making everything kind of go. And the thing that I mentioned is what all three of these guys have in common is that they're all in the late game. 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So while I probably don't need to do it anyway, because we're going to get to these guys regardless of what we do, still think it's probably a good idea to downgrade the projections of everybody from the early games just a little bit, or upgrade the ones from the late games. Next thing I want to look at is just for a minute, let's rate these by Sheets value score, just to see like really who the best plays are. In other words, if salary were an issue, like who would we want to get to? And that would, one of them would be Embiid. This is a really strong score here. Okay, I mean, he's got this matchup with Andre Drummond on the other side of him, and as long as there's no minutes limit or anything like that, I mean, this is, very, very strong spot. So if you get up to him, that's great. Shea 10-3 looks good, but this is a pretty big gap from Embiid down to these other guys. So it's something to keep in mind. And then you have all four of these looking very similar: Tatum, Morant, Shea, Sabonis, and the ownership on them is relatively tame. So it's going to be a slate where I think you can build, good lineups if you commit to that value in the late games. The other thing I'd like to do is when I sort by Sheets value score, see if there's anybody low salary that's close. Not really. So it's Chris Paul. We mentioned him before. And then we rate them by points per dollar. Let's do the opposite, see who the most expensive guys up here. And once again, it's Embiid and Sabonis. And again, the more these names get mentioned in your different ways of screening, the more you can just confirm that they're good plays. So no matter how you slice it, Embiid's a good play. No matter how you slice it, Chris Paul is a good play. That's just the way it is. And they're probably going to be really high owned. I don't think 20% on Embiid is reasonable. I think he's going to be higher, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Now we look at the games for kind of stacking purposes. Again, keep in mind, the early games are rough, because the more, how do I put this? The more opportunities you have to late swap, the more decisions you leave till later, the more you can profit based on your knowledge of what happened earlier. Like if you commit to all these 7 o'clock games, then you deprive yourself of a decision that you could make later if something shows up, or if, let's say that you don't play somebody in the early game and you need to pick up steam later. If you don't leave yourself enough outs later, you can't take advantage of that. However, the 7 o'clock game, I already mentioned that Embiid is probably a really good play, and it's going to put yourself to a decision really quickly, because it is an early game. But I mean, you're probably going to want to play one of these studs anyway, right? Whether it be Embiid, Shea, Sabonis, these guys at around 10K. So it's not that big of a deal. Like if you play Embiid, I mean, it's a good enough play on its own that you can you could kill off some of your flexibility a little bit later. Appreciate that, Joanne. Now, let's take a look at this game and see if like anybody shows up, on the other side of this. So there's Embiid, right? So we're looking for anybody in Chicago that looks good. So DeRozan is the first guy here. And I guess that's reasonable. But none of these other guys are showing up really at all. Like these Chicago guys, like Caruso, they were showing up with such great force recently because of the absence of this type of value. Now you're not getting any of them. So I think if you did want to stack this game, you could play Embiid with DeRozan. DeRozan's a good enough play where you can play him. But when you do that, again, you're playing a little, two guys in the early games, not necessarily the best, but you can do it because, again, even at 5,100 a man left, you can make that work really, really easily. But I wouldn't go anywhere else, honestly, from this game, except for Embiid and maybe DeRozan because of that early game bias that I think it's important to have. The only other one I would think about is maybe Drummond here. But as you see, I mean, there's a lot of centers. Well, hold on. So there's centers, one of them being that one of the cheapos. And then there's Sabonis. Bismack Biyombo is another cheapo. Aside from that, I mean, I will say this about Drummond. He's in a range which is sort of by himself. In other words, he's definitely the top play of these 8Ks, and he's only looking like 2% owned. So it's what's left to decide is, again, this is something that's been debated, is whether you would want to play two centers from the same game. I've heard it argued both ways. I'm going to let SaberSim and the Sims kind of dictate that for me. The only thing it's an issue because they're both fighting for the same rebound a lot of the time, and the foul trouble, this kind of thing. Like if Embiid's having a good game, he's probably putting a lot of pressure on Drummond, so. Yeah, the only issue I would have with Embiid, with Phila here is I really don't have any issue except he's been out, so maybe he's not 100%. That's the best I can do, as far as giving you a reason to not play him. Plus, I imagine they're a decent enough favorite where there's a certain amount of blowout risk, where also he may or may not, completely smash. But like you're saying. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it's Cecily sipping. I'm not hungover. I'm just thirsty. That's the best. I'm sorry. I just keep sipping it back again. But yeah, definitely. Hey, if I was hungover until January 2nd, that would be pretty bad. That would be pretty bad. Yeah, I apologize. It's the way it is. All right, so. So I think you could play Drummond and Embiid, but I don't really think that it's probably optimal. So let's move on. San Antonio, Memphis. I didn't see anybody from this. Well, here's what I have. I have Morant and Jaren Jackson both looking really good, and I also have Bismack Biyombo at 3,800 looking reasonable. So this is looking like a pretty stackable game actually. You have Desmond Bane looks reasonable. So you have four guys from Memphis that all project well. You don't really have too much, if anything, on the San Antonio side, though. You have Wembanyama here, but they haven't really been letting him loose as far as the minutes go. But as you'll see, it's pretty disgusting what this guy can do. I mean, what was this? 36 fantasy points in 24 minutes, against Portland, 61 fantasy points in 24 minutes. That's tough, man. I mean, is 24 minutes enough, though? I wouldn't bet on it. Okay, that's the only thing. Boy, that's tough. If he's really limiting him to 24 minutes, he does have 60 in there. You just can't expect that. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do it. So the question is if you don't really want to play anybody from San Antonio, what can you really do on the Memphis side? You know, I wouldn't play too many guys in the same lineup, except I will say this, that you're not getting negative correlation with Jackson, with Jaren Jackson Jr., Morant, because they don't do the same things. You know, like one's not stealing rebounds or assists or points from the other one. They're completely different positions. And the Memphis, and then you have Biyombo, who probably fits pretty decently. Maybe I wouldn't play Biyombo with Jaren Jackson in the same lineup. But I think that you could play two of these three together. But the problem is you don't really have a San Antonio run back. So I don't really think that it's, you could play one-offs from here. Like if you get Jaren Jackson Jr., you get Morant, that's fine. But I wouldn't go out of my way to play multiple ones. Maybe Roth. Possible. Boston OKC. I mean, obviously that's a great real life basketball game. You're going to have both teams to some degree are going to see where they're at. Specifically OKC. It's going to be a crazy game. I mean, I think at OKC they're at home, and this is one of their test games. So any one of these guys can pop off. Between Giddey, Shea. I'm not really getting to too much though. So Tatum. So I guess what I would do is, if you wanted, I'm not much for making groups in advance, but if you wanted to make a rule for Boston guys to take, say, max one of those starters, I think that's reasonable. And OKC, Chet looks reasonable enough, but they're just better plays, I think. I think they're better plays. I mean, I'd rather play. Well, would I rather play Drummond than Chet? That's a good question. Good question. But again, I think that in these types of games, you don't really want to play more than one, just because they're all pretty decently priced. And then Brooklyn, New Orleans. Again, we're gonna run a Saberson build to try to capture all these individual plays that we're talking about, especially those late games, which we're going to get to. But for these early games, I just want to make sure that we don't want to stack any of these, because that's where I'd like to get my, if I'm going to commit to a game, that's probably what I would do. So in the Brooklyn game, who is it? Brooklyn against New Orleans. All right, so you got Brandon Ingram, looks reasonable enough, and you have Michael Bridges is reasonable enough. So I guess this is all right. Zion. So it's either going to be one of these two, probably Ingram with Zion and Michael Bridges. Sure, I mean that's perfectly okay. And the reason why all this is we can do all this stuff is because of the value that we're going to get to in a minute here. So first of all, so the Charlotte-Sacramento game is where you're getting the real chalky, one of the real chalky pieces, and that would be Ish Smith. He's a $4,300 starting point guard, and that's just kind of tough to fade in general. You have a guy that's going to play or could play 30 minutes at point guard. He's always going to have the ball in his hands. It's tough to fade. I mean, I will say he is on a back-to-back, so that's something. And it's possible that his backup, who is, I think, Nick Smith Jr., I mean, he's only 4K, and if this game blows out, which it certainly could, they're a huge underdog here to Sacramento. then maybe they give the younger guy, Nick Smith Jr., this kind of blowout run, and maybe he gets there. So all the more reason why you should kind of wait until later to figure this stuff out. You could put in Ish Smith, but I'll tell you this, that if your lineups are not doing so great, you need a little bit of juice, you could just pivot at the end from what's going to be a 70% owned or maybe 60% owned Ish Smith to Nick Smith Jr., who's not going to project as well, but if you get the right game script, you know, he certainly can outscore him. Anybody else in Charlotte here? Miles Bridges looks reasonable at 8,100. So you could – the problem here again with it's just very unlikely that this game is close. So once you get involved in really, you know, playing multiple guys, you're kind of asking for trouble, especially when you're paying 8,100 for him. I mean, Ish Smith can get there if the game blows out. I don't know if Miles Bridges almost certainly could not. And then on the other side, on Sacramento, you know, Domantas Sabonis is an extremely strong play. But again, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of minutes upside from this. He certainly has minutes downside if the game blows out. So I think that one way to handle this is if you wanted to play Sabonis, that's when you play someone like Miles Bridges. Okay, because I think for both of these guys to hit their ceiling, the game's got to stay close. So I think I would play those guys together and maybe even include Ish Smith. So that is something that you can do. And then in the last game, we have some really, really good value on the Golden State side. They finally decided they were going to start Trayce Jackson-Davis. And so as a result, he's now projecting as the top point per dollar play on the slate and probably one of the highest owned, if not the highest owned, on the slate. So he's very, very strong. And Chris Paul, you know, he's just too cheap, 5,600 starting point guard and all that stuff. So both those guys make sense. And then on the other side, you have these two Orlando guys. So this becomes an extremely easy game to stack. You know, you could play Chris Paul and Trayce Jackson-Davis, and you could play at least one of these guys. I almost think you could play two of them, but at least with one. So no matter how you slice it, this late game is very, very strong. You know, and why you should save your punches, you know, for later. You could also play Steph Curry, I suppose, in this game. He's only 8,800, especially if you're going to stack. I wouldn't play Chris Paul and Curry together, though. So if you want to play Curry, for example, with Jackson Davis, and then play one or two of these guys from Orlando, you could certainly make that work. So I think it's a handy little slate. You know, the good plays, I don't want to say stand out, but you know who they are, and you can make some interesting lineups using stacking as well. But let's pull up SaberSim and let's see what we get there, because it would be, you know, probably 30 slates in a row where I thought SaberSim would get me something, and it ended up getting me something completely different. So let's just take a look. Now, again, I know for some of you here for the first time, I mean, I use my own projections. Well, not my own. These are the same ones I put up on the site, but you have to be a member to see these. And if you're a SaberSim member, this automatically populates for you. Anyway, so just to show you what to do. So you have your own projections in here, or you can use SaberSim. It doesn't matter. For the purposes of this discussion, my ownerships are all over here. And then we're going to build 50 lineups. And it's important to know what we're looking at here. And that's the only thing I'm changing. No minimum salary. I'm leaving everything else by default. And we're going to build 50 lineups. And then what's really important, and this is all we're trying to do here, we're building 5,000 lineups. You see, like 85 out of 5,000 or whatever. And the only question is, how are those 5,000 going to be ranked? Like, how are we going to display them? Are they going to be displayed, because we're only playing 50? Are we going to display them based on just which projects the best? Are we going to, display which 50 has the best combination of upside and ownership? Are we going to project the best lineups that are specifically tailored to the contest we're trying to enter? Well, we're going to look at all those things, you know, and I'll show you how to do this again, this contest sim, and we'll see what we would get. And I think it's always interesting to see the difference between how you rank them, you know, what it looks like. Like right here, actually, let's start with just by projected score, right? So if all we're doing is putting the median projection in, running our lineups, whatever, this is what we would end up getting. And that would be lineups with, I would get 100% of Trace Jackson Davis, Chris Paul, and Ish Smith. And then the next group would be these three: Jaren Jackson Jr., Joel Embiid, and wow, Chris Duarte. I didn't even see him. 46%. I guess he's 4K. Looks to be having a good projection. About 5x, not bad for 4K. I'm kind of hoping we don't have to play him though, just because again, you know, a 4K guy you usually need more than 5x out of to make work. So anyway, but this is what we're getting when we just rate them based on projected score. So we remember this. Let's see if it's a lot different. We rate them in other ways. So we rate them by Saber score. Now again, what Saber score is it rates them based on a combination of ceiling and upside. And if you want to get a little more drill down here, you'll click on this little eye here. This is going to be considered a large slate. Well, we could make it a small slate. 6, so it's a little bit of whatever. So let's call it a large slate. Before we even get into it, you'll see what this means. We put this eye here, we click it, and this is what your Saber score calculation is. It's the sum of your projection times 0.1, and it accounts for average adjusted ownership, okay? And they're looking for the 95th percentile outcome. I wouldn't get too hung up on that, but the point is when we look at them rated this way, you still get almost 100% of those three guys. You're getting 100% Chris Paul, 100% Smith, and not quite 100% of Trace Jackson Davis. Now, what you'll find is that in basketball, the difference between when you run things based on just raw projections and Saber score and contest sims is much less than the difference you get when you run it in other sports. Like I'm going to be doing a hockey video a little later, and you'll see the difference with hockey. The difference with hockey is amazing between your raw projections, even your Saber score projections, and your contest sim projections. Speaking of which, let's so here's one thing you can do, by the way. Another thing to kind of give yourself maybe less than 100% is you could click, you know, min uniques 3 or maybe even more. You see it kind of give you a little less of those top guys. But I want to run the contest sim, so what we're doing is, the first thing I want to do is I want to upload what I have now to my DraftKings lineups. These are the things that I played already. I entered, so that's why this showed up right away when I uploaded the DraftKings lineups. Let's just save all these here. We'll confirm them. And then what we want to do is we want to save these settings of the contest sims. So what that's going to do is it's going to give Saber Sim an idea. It's going to tell what we're playing, and then it's going to then allow us to rank these lineups again, specifically designed to play those contests. To answer your question, I don't even. Yeah, so I don't know. With Sandro, I don't even have him projected all that great. So I don't know how much I'm getting. I mean, right now I'm getting. I don't know. We'll find out. And if that projection changes, we'll obviously update that. But again, we're just kind of showing you what we're doing here. So now we're going to hit this run contest sim, and it's running What it's doing, if anybody cares, is it's creating kind of like a pool of lineups that the field is expected to play in all of those contests that I saved. And you think about why that's important. Like if we knew what everybody was playing, we'd be able to change our lineups to get the appropriate leverage against them. Now we don't know exactly what they're playing, obviously, but it was unable to complete. Oh, probably the qualifier hasn't been able to. Kind of tough to do that one. But so while we don't know exactly what they're going to play, SaberSim is making an honest, a reasonable estimate with its algorithm based on the ownerships we put in, and based on it's probably running like 50,000 lineups in each of these contests. And you'd think that people would play a little more aggressively in the fadeaway because there are more entries, and the splash they're being a little more conservative, and it's also taken into account what the payout structure is. So let's see the difference now. So let's look at the fadeaway, and what we do is we click the arrow, we put risk-adjusted ROI, RAROI, and you'll see that you still don't get too much of a difference, right? So Ish Smith, Chris Paul, Trace Jackson Davis. Even with Min Uniques 3, it's pretty much the same thing. The other thing that we could do, and just kind of show you how to do this. So we'll go into team stacks. Now, if we want to do this, well, before we do this, I think I should save these. I'm changing all these anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. But just, I guess, to show you how to do that. For the fadeaway, we're going to save the fadeaways to the fadeaway, right? Makes sense. Then we're going to save the splash to the splash. We'll save the showtime to the showtime. Well, let's do the alley-oop first. And I just always think that you should save stuff whenever you make them, just in case you forget later. And then what we'll do is, again, we'll put in the showtime, and we'll cheat a little bit. We'll put that in the splash and the showtime. I think we have everything already, right? So let's keep it over here. So that's all fine. Alley-oop we did. And now for the satellite, we're just going to put the top projected score. Projected score, and then we'll put, hey, there. You know what? I'll shout you out. Who are you here? Roth. I'll show you right now. Currently, in the satellite, top projected scorer gets me actually Marcus Smart. How do you like them apples? There it is. So I'm hoping you're right. Maybe he will pop off for 36 fantasy points. Presuming this slate lock now, of course. But let's just see what would happen if I did what I said with the projected points. So what's easier, to increase the lower ones? Yeah, well, let's increase the higher ones. And we're just gonna, I guess, what's good? 2 points? Yeah, let's put all these guys from the later games. We'll move it up 2 points. And then where's Charlotte, Sacramento, Orlando, right? So those 4, those 2 games. And let's rerun them. Apply change to games, yes. So now let's rebuild everything. And I'm curious to see what changes. I don't think anything. I think if anything, I just end up getting more of those guys, right? But I wonder if I get more of the ancillary pieces. Let's see. And then after this, we're going to do FanDuel. We'll do the same thing over there. Hashtag incessant sipping. All right, so when we change the projected points from the game, I wonder if that did anything. I hope so, but let's see. Players. Exposure still 100% Ish and Paul. 82% Embiid. But you do get a little more of these other Charlotte guys, which is sort of interesting. Just sort of what I want. Maybe I'm going to do that today. But remember that if you don't commit to looking later, to late swapping, then you're just kind of just doing this for no reason. You know, and once again, when am I going to do this? At some point, I'm going to have to do an in-game tutorial on late swapping. So I have to find a time. I can do that. I can do that. I can record that, actually. But anyway, all right. So did I run this contest sims yet? No, I did. So here, with the new projections, let's see what we would get in the fadeaway. Yeah, even more of those guys, right? Even more of those guys, which is totally cool. I mean, I think that's perfectly okay. So we'll change these to Min Uniques 3. And I wonder if that's going to save my settings for later. You swapped off the nuts last night? Ouch. Yeah, the good thing is when I do it, I don't remember what I had before. So it's just this way I don't know. It's nice and easy that way. The ignorance is bliss. Alley-oop. So for those of you, again, just to recap what I did here, okay? So I presumed that there was value in those late games. So I didn't give myself more exposure, but I manually reduced the team totals or increased the team totals of those late games. And then hopefully, well, whatever, I'm then able to screw around with that if I want. And just so you know, Phil or whatever, that I'm still getting those same guys, the top projected score. So I would still be getting the Marcus Smart play. All right, so we'll upload these, and then we'll do FanDuel. Then we'll do the same thing. All right, let's go back to SaberSim. We'll go to FanDuel, and I also like to see the which players are uniquely valuable on FanDuel, just because of the way the position eligibility works over there, and obviously different salaries. All right, so let's first of all, let's do the same thing. Let's first change these projected points before we even do anything. Actually, I think we have to upload the projections first, or maybe we don't. I actually don't know. Let's upload them first. Exclude unlisted players, and now let's up these team totals Charlotte, Sacramento, Orlando, Golden State. Save these, and then build lineups 50 again. The only thing I didn't do is I didn't enter anything over there yet. So actually, I'm doing that on the other side. Let's get over there on the monster again. Play that. Reserve. We'll play the shot as well. One sec, guys. There's one thing I forgot to do before we went on here, and that's fine. This is almost done. Okay, so similar. You're getting almost all of the Ish Smith and Chris Paul, but now look at these other guys who are showing up on FanDuel. Sabonis, Malik Monk. That's interesting. More Malachi Branham. So that's interesting. Let's do the same thing as before, though. Let's run a contest sim, but let's first we'll save all these to here, and I just created the dummy lineups. And then we'll run the contest sims. No, for whatever reason, Noah, I'm not. I don't do the NHL live for some reason. I just want to do. I just record that. I don't think as many people would show up for the live, so I just kind of record it at my leisure. I'm probably going to do it pretty soon. So just follow the YouTube channel, and you'll see that pop up. I mean, it'll probably be right after this, honestly. I have to see what the rest of my schedule looks like. Okay, so we ran the contest sim for the shot and the monster. And let's see again if there's any real difference. In the monster, no, I don't want to do the monster yet. First, we'll do the shot, which is the smaller buy-in. So once again, Ish Smith, 100%. Brandon Miller, though, more, and Malik Monk. So these are the main differences. FanDuel versus DraftKings. So we'll save these over here. And again, the trick, unfortunately, with the NBA, well, I shouldn't say that. I was about to say that the real trick in the NBA is knowing how to run your technology and run it quickly, as opposed to being able to study and like mess around with your lineups and stuff like that. However, that just depends on how on how many lineups you play. I mean, you could certainly take your time, and I've done the hand building stuff before. And for my big buy-ins, I mean that is still what I do. But yeah, okay, no, you want to do one real quick, just for the hell. No, actually, I gotta keep this pure. You gotta watch the YouTube channel. It should be up like within the hour or so. Yes, definitely big 13-game slate. Definitely playing it. But so that's basically the process. And listen, there are obviously tweaks that you can make, and there are rules that you can make along the way, which I mentioned. And I guess I didn't go over how to do that here, but it's pretty easy. Like if you wanted to do, you go lineup rules. This isn't SaberSim, but all the optimizers let you do this, right? You go new rule, group, and then if you wanted to only have, one of, what did I say, like one those Boston guys, You just pick, max 1 of Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, I guess, and just put at least no more than 1, and then save the rule. It's called Celtic starters if you want, and save the rule, and then you can run it like that after that. And then you could unclick this or click it or whatever. Okay, nice tidy 6-game slate. Hopefully we don't get too much more information. And I will be around at 6 to go over late changes and things like that. Hopefully this helped. Feel free to ask whatever questions you want. Where would you ask? Go to the Discord, ask questions there. Unfortunately, Bobby's not around a couple of days. Hopefully other people can help you. I'm not on Discord as much as maybe I should be, but can I tell you? All right, that's it. Good luck.